Today's video is all about the mistakes you're going to want to avoid when buying a townhouse in Vancouver. Over my 18-year career, I've seen it all. I've seen so many people, whether they're my clients or not, make incredibly costly, time-consuming mistakes when purchasing townhouses in Vancouver. I want to help you avoid these mistakes when you're purchasing a townhouse in Vancouver as well. So watch this video all the way to the end, because every single one of these points is absolutely critical so that you don't make a mistake when you're purchasing a townhouse in Vancouver. Let's get into all the details right now. My name is Sebastian Albrecht with the Living in Vancouver, BC team, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this channel is all about moving to and living in Vancouver. I put out videos just like this one every single week. And in fact, I've made a couple videos like this one about mistakes that I see people make when purchasing property in Vancouver. The last couple were all about condos. This one's about townhouses. I'm gonna wrap all these together for you in a playlist on my channel so you can be sure not to miss any of these pieces of information. You might be considering a condo, you might be considering a townhouse, and down the road, I'm gonna be talking about houses and duplexes as well. These are videos you're not gonna wanna miss. But for now, we're talking about mistakes that you want to avoid when you're purchasing a townhouse in Vancouver. And mistake number one is not being aware of the different types of townhouses. And specifically here, I'm talking about townhouses that are freestanding, that are attached to only other townhouses, a pure, simple townhouse development, versus a townhouse that it's at the foot of a condominium building and it's just one part of a larger strata. And these are incredibly different situations to be getting into, and there's a very stark difference that you need to be aware of. Specifically, when you're attached to a condominium development, to a tower, these townhouses are at the base of the tower, you typically get much more in the way of amenities. You might have a concierge, you might have a pool, you might have a gym. There might be things like that. You're more likely to have less outdoor space and you're less likely to have a garage in these situations. But what you're most likely to have, and what I want to caution people about most of all, is that you're most likely going to have a significant maintenance fee. And then conversely, when you're looking at smaller developments that are just pure townhouse developments. And here we're talking typically outside of downtown Vancouver, outside of the core centers of even some of our suburbs. These are much more likely sort of in the 20 to 35 unit size, roughly in that sort of scope. These have most likely no amenities or very few amenities. There's definitely not going to be a concierge. There's probably no pool. There's no gym, nothing like that. What you're not getting is an enormous maintenance fee. An example that I just came across to illustrate my point, this particular townhouse development, we're looking at basically the same price, roughly the same size of unit, but in the smaller situation where there is just about 30, 40 units, the maintenance fee is just $400. Conversely, when I'm looking at the same price range, the same size of unit, you're looking at triple the amount for a unit that's attached to strata tower. So we're looking at $400 versus $1,200. And you want to be well aware of what you're getting yourself into. Don't just assume that every single townhouse development is exactly the same and that the expenses that you're going to be carrying are exactly the same. Because the difference, if you're just paying $400 or you're paying triple that, is really significant. That extra $800 a month, that could be roughly $300,000 of, well, let's call it $250,000 of mortgage that you could be carrying and that you could be paying off every single month. Your maintenance fee is essentially kind of just going out your pocket. Yes, there are things that you're getting for that maintenance fee, but you don't have control over where it's going. Personally, I would be much more interested myself in a smaller townhouse development that doesn't have the big amenities, but where the maintenance fees are considerably lower and I can control my own expenses rather than relying on the strata and yes, getting more amenities. But they're, to be honest, as I've talked about in other videos, most of us don't really end up using the amenities that we're paying for. Mistake number two that I find people make is not paying attention to different types of parking. Not all parking is created equal. And most of us, when we're looking at townhouses, imagine ourselves having a detached garage, a garage that is private, that we can close off, that we can use not just for parking our car or putting our bikes away. Maybe it's a space that we could end up using as storage, a space that we could end up using maybe for a home office, probably just like puttering around and fixing things, working on our bikes, a little bit of a workspace. All of that is something that you can only really have when you control the space. Not every townhouse comes with a detached garage, or a separate garage, I should say, a private garage. Many of them, especially those that are attached to the condo towers, will only have underground parking. And yes, you will have parking, but it will be open. There will be no privacy, there will be no storage, there will be no ability to use that space for anything other than parking your car. And it isn't just those townhouse developments that are attached to strata towers. Many townhouse developments, especially in the city of Vancouver that are more recently built, have underground parkades, and very few have attached garages. And those attached garages are becoming increasingly valuable as land becomes increasingly valuable in Vancouver. And so you might want to think long and hard about giving that up and whether it's worth giving that up. You just want to basically, the whole point here is I want to draw your attention to the fact, just because there's parking doesn't mean that it's the same kind of parking. It could be a detached garage, it could be an underground parkade, it could be an attached garage that's part of your unit that you can walk right into, which would be even better. And just between you and I, many of those units end up using that space, converting it out of being a parking stall and into being their own usable space, like a den, like a family room, like a playroom, like a gym, just usable space that you and I all know that we need in our day-to-day lives. Keep that in mind. Don't make the mistake of not paying attention to what kind of parking is coming along with your townhouse. Number 3 is a big one, and this is not realizing that when you're purchasing a townhouse, you are part of a strata. You are part of a group of owners that is splitting the ownership of the same parcel of land, if it's a freehold strata, that is. And so as a result, there are rules and there are bylaws that govern the use of the property. You can't do whatever it is that you want. And we need to be careful here because in different jurisdictions, this is handled differently. And I know in Ontario, as an example, a place where I get a fair number of clients moving to Vancouver, that when you say a freehold townhouse, it means something completely different than it does here in Vancouver. In Ontario, what that means is you are the exclusive owner of the townhouse and the parcel of land that it sits on. You can do whatever you want. There are no essentially rules or bylaws that govern what you can or cannot do. That is not the case here in Vancouver. Here, you are part of a strata, and the strata, the owners as a whole, you are one of those owners, but you only have one voice in terms of deciding what happens in the future. And you didn't get a voice in what it is that they're doing right now. So when you move in, you have to abide by the bylaws and the rules that are in place. And I can tell you, I've had clients and I've heard of people that have moved into stratas not thinking that they need to follow the rules or not realizing just how much power a strata actually does have, and very, very quickly finding themselves in a very uncomfortable living situation, not understanding that all the neighbors, all the other owners are upset with them because they're not following the rules that everybody else has to follow. And an example would be a friend of mine who installed a gate in a fence. It was his fence, it was part of his unit, he felt, so he could do whatever he wanted, but it wasn't. It was owned by all of the owners as dictated by the strata plan. It was legally divided. And so the strata had to have the right, or has the right, to say whether or not he could add a gate into his fence so that he could come and go out of the back of his unit. He racked up hundreds, it turned into thousands, over $10,000 in strata fines because he didn't realize that he actually had to listen to his strata. Unfortunately, he didn't ask me before he installed that gate into his fence. But he learned very, very quickly the hard way by racking up enormous fines that you do have to listen to the strata and that the strata does govern what you're able to do. You don't have complete freedom. You are part of a strata, you are a group of owners, and there are rules and bylaws that govern how you're able to use your property. Now, if you're thinking of moving to Vancouver and you'd like to purchase a home and you want to avoid these and many other mistakes when you're purchasing a home, I help all of my clients avoid these mistakes. I can help you as well. I've helped hundreds of families move from across the world, across Canada specifically, to Vancouver and settle into their ideal homes. I can help you whenever you're ready. Reach out to me anytime and we can get that conversation started. Now let's get back to the video. Another mistake that I find a lot of people make is just focusing on square footage. The truth is not all square footage is equal, kind of like parking, kind of like the types of townhouses? Well, with square footage in particular, it really matters how it's divided when it comes to a townhouse, because townhouses typically aren't just one floor. Especially in Vancouver, most often they're 3 floors. Sometimes you'll find 2-floor townhouses. Even more frequently these days, as the land becomes more and more valuable, we're building higher and higher. So 4 levels is not all that unusual. And so if you have the same amount of square footage split between 2 levels or 4 levels, it's a really different use of the space. The more stairs there are, the less usable the space becomes. So I pulled a couple examples and I just found, basically roughly around 1,250 square feet. The difference that you can see between a unit that has 4 floors, you can see how much tighter everything is. You can see that we don't have multiple uses of space on the same floor. Bedrooms are really broken up. This is something, especially when you're a family and you have children, you want young children in particular, you want to be close to where those children are. Now, in my own experience, I'm not sure if that's the wisest thing to do. I kind of like a little bit of space between me and my kids, especially when they're learning how to sleep. That being said, most of us do want to be relatively close to our children. Most of us want bedrooms on the same floor, especially when they are young. And that's not something that's really possible when you split up this kind of square footage over many floors. Now, conversely, if you're looking at the same square footage on just 2 levels, well, you can see how you have a much more usable floor plate. You have open living space. You have a kitchen, dining, and living room that all flow into one, which so many people these days are looking for. And then you have 3 bedrooms on 1 floor, which for most families is the ideal situation. And even if you break that up into 3 floors, you're gonna find that that 3rd bedroom most often is gonna be on the 3rd floor. You're not gonna have 3 bedrooms on the same floor more often than not. It's very critical that you don't just focus on the total square footage, but look at how that square footage is used and how it's broken up. And you might find that 1,000 square feet is on 1 level, maybe it's on 2 levels, is more functional, more usable than 1,300 square feet broken up on 4 levels. Don't just pay attention to total square footage, pay attention to usable, valuable square footage. Now, since we just talked about that square footage and the usable square footage on different floors, I want to point out one other thing that, I think most of us would consider fairly obvious, but that is townhouses tend to have stairs. We don't tend to have a single level townhouse. We do have townhouses that are 2 stories, 3 stories, and 4 stories. And if you are older, and frankly, really at any age, I think you need to consider whether you're comfortable with the amount of stairs that are in the townhouse that you're looking at. I think most people are going to be okay with 1 flight of stairs, having a 2-level townhouse. Many people are okay with a 3-level townhouse that has 2 flights of stairs. But what I've found is when people have more than that, maybe it's 3 levels, but on the main level, the 4th level is just the entrance, and you have to go up the stairs every single time. If you forget your keys, if you got to run in with groceries, you got to climb that set of stairs. Those types of things can drive you nuts. And so you do want to be really careful. You want to think about, is this okay? Am I making a compromise that I'm not going to be comfortable with over the long term? And many people do find that those 4 levels are too much, not just because you're losing the usable square footage, but also just because of the amount of stairs you're running up and down. And if you're a little bit older, if you're at the age where you're approaching retirement, honestly, I'm not that far away. As shocking as that might seem to you, it's even more shocking to me. I am almost 50. And so, it's not that far away. When I move out of the house that I am in, would I move into a townhouse 5, 10, 15 years from now? Probably not. I would probably think long and hard about that because, I do exercise, I take good care of myself, but one day my body's gonna find it more challenging to go up and down those stairs. And I might not want to do that all the time. So many people, as they get older, should really think hard about whether the townhouse is the right option for them. I'd be lax in my duty if I didn't point out a thing you might want to be considering. If you love everything about townhouses, if you love the idea of being on the ground floor, if you love the access to the outdoors, maybe being able to come and go, not through the inside of the condo building, but through your own front door, and having more outdoor space, but maybe not really absolutely having to have an enclosed garage, well, you might want to think about a condo, a ground floor condo, because that's the one way. There's very little difference between a ground floor condo and a townhouse. other than the ground floor condo doesn't have stairs, or most often doesn't have stairs. And so you might be getting all the things that you want in a townhouse, but getting it in a condo that's ground floor, and then you can age in that property. You don't need to worry about the stairs. So that is something to think about as you approach the idea of buying a townhouse, especially if you're a little bit older. And finally, the last mistake I want to help you avoid is probably one of the most significant ones, and that is not even considering the possibility of a half duplex. Well, what is a half duplex? A half duplex is one property that's divided between two owners. It's different from a townhouse because a townhouse typically has 3 or more owners. And with a townhouse, you're typically going to have a maintenance fee. You're typically going to have a strata council. There's going to be rules and bylaws, and there's going to be all sorts of sort of overhead. Do you remember a while back I talked about how people buying townhouses sometimes make the mistake of not realizing it's a strata? Well, if you want to avoid that hassle, you might want to be looking at buying a half duplex. Half duplexes are also stratas, but they basically they're called non-conforming stratas. They don't follow the same rules because they're under the requirement. There's so few units. It's just not practical to have minutes, to require financial reporting for 2 owners that split the same property. The price range can be very similar. You can be in a market where a townhouse might cost you 1.4 million and a half duplex might be 1.5 million. Now, they're probably not going to be exactly the same. That's probably going to be a pretty new townhouse, and that's probably going to be a little bit older, a half duplex. But what you're getting with the half duplex is the land. You're getting the lack of the rules and the bylaws, and you're not having to pay a regular maintenance fee. So you're not forced to pay, as we talked about early on, that example in downtown Vancouver, $1,200 a month every single month for very little return. You control that money. You probably should save a little bit of money every month so that you can pay for a new roof 20 years from now, or a new hot water tank, or whatever it happens to be, to garden, to pay for a gardener every month. These are things that would be covered in a typical townhouse, but they won't be covered when you own a duplex. The other advantages would be it's just one other owner, one person that you need to negotiate with and deal with, one shared wall. You're also much more likely to have your own separate detached private garage. That's not super common when it comes to a townhouse. It's not uncommon to have an enclosed private garage, but it's very uncommon for that to be detached. And then you're also much more likely to have significant outdoor space. One property divided between 2 owners in the case of a duplex, you're gonna have a pretty nice yard. That's gonna be usable space. I mean, to be frank, I live in a house and I really barely use my yard. My front yard is basically just garden. There's nowhere to play. My backyard, about 1/3 of it is used up by deck. That we use a lot. But the other 2/3 of my backyard is essentially some landscaping and a giant trampoline and a shed. And between that, we rarely go out and use our backyard. You would be using the yard that you have in a half duplex much, much more. And I know that a lot of people that want to buy townhouses love outdoor space. So again, do not at least considering purchasing a half duplex if you're thinking about buying a townhouse. It may be within your price range. You might be surprised. And another point about half duplexes, you can find half duplexes that have income suites. And so that can make it even more affordable. Your only option going from between a townhouse and a house, there is an option between them, and that is a half duplex. You might find it affordable, especially if you have an income suite there. Oh my goodness, I love sharing this information, and I hope it helps you avoid mistakes when purchasing townhouses in Vancouver. I've been putting these videos together for about 1.5 years at this point, and I really do enjoy putting this information out there, hearing from you, and seeing the reaction that I'm getting from all of you that watch these videos. And I really do appreciate all of the responses that I'm getting, the comments, the likes, the subscribes. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. I really, really do appreciate it. If you are thinking of moving to Vancouver, of course, I am a real estate agent that's helped hundreds of families just like yours settle in Vancouver. So if you're thinking of moving here and purchasing a home, well, reach out anytime and we can start the conversation about how I can help you and your family get settled here. If you'd like to see more videos just like this one, hit that like button, smash the subscribe button. I do put out videos like this every single week, all about living in and moving to Vancouver. I also have a series of videos all about avoiding mistakes when purchasing property in Vancouver. It's not just townhouses, it's also about condos, soon to be houses and duplexes too. I'm gonna put that all together in a playlist for you right there. And I also want to meet you on another video. This one over here is all about purchasing townhouses in Vancouver. Be sure to check that out. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on next week's video.